is ended. The Atari 8-bit podcast.
His vision and his ability to find technology that was ahead of the market was just remarkable. I mean, he continually had these visionary ideas which he was able to actually implement.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Peter Donoso was managing editor of Atari Explorer magazine from September 1991 through February 1993, primarily covering Atari during the ST era. This interview took place on November 23, 2015. Okay, so I understand you were editor of Atari Explorer, correct?
Yes, I was the editor from May, June 91 on. Actually, it was September of 91.
Okay. And that was through when? 94?
That was through February of 93. That was the last issue. And prior to that, the editor of Atari Explorer, who was John Janschig at the time, had been with Atari Explorer prior to when he took it over as a contributing editor. And then in, I think, January of 91, we took that over and started publishing it as the editor-in-chief.
Okay.
I hope I got those years right.
So tell me how you got there. How did you end up as editor of the magazine? Tell me the story before you got there.
To be honest with you, I really don't remember exactly how I got the job. I remember that it was most likely it was either through answering an ad or because I had met John at one of the Atari computer shows. But I think actually I had answered an ad. And his offices were set up in Queens, New York, in Astoria. And that's where he was publishing it out of. And he was contracted by the Atari Corporation.
All right. So this was a magazine created by an outside company for Atari.
Well, Atari Explorer had existed since '85.
Right.
But at a certain point, the editorial staff that had taken stewardship of the magazine up to that point, either they had left or there were conflicts going on.
Right.
Editorially.
It started off originally. David All, who was a previous magazine publisher at Creative Computing, I think was the original editor of Atari Explorer, and but then a lot of stuff happened, and several editors came and went. I think
haven't really kept track of or really had an understanding of what all the politics were, but it used to be David All, Betsy Staples, and John Janschig.
All right, so you land in the offices, and what were you doing? What state were things in, and how did you? What did you do?
Well, pretty much it was. There were still transitions going on. The art director, who had been with the magazine for when John first took it over, the first couple of issues had left. There was Needleman, who was, I think, an art director for one issue. And then Jesus Diaz took over that and pretty much followed through to the end of the publication of the magazine, which was, I think he came on in probably March or February of 92, up until 93.
So what did your job consist of doing?
Well, basically, I coordinated the deadlines for articles. I called up and checked with writers to see what was going on in terms of their anticipated submission of the articles, and basically did a fair amount of the office administrative stuff. So, and I also wrote some articles, some under my own byline, some under a pseudonym, which I have a very warm affection for, Dakota Crespo.
Say it again?
The name was Dakota Crespo.
Dakota Crespo. Why that name?
Yeah. Well, Crespo is my my mother's, actually my father's mother's maiden name, and in Spanish culture they usually keep the mother's name as well as the father's. So it was Donoso, Crespo Donoso was my father's name, and I just thought Dakota sounded really cool.
And why did you use a byline? Just so it didn't look like the whole magazine was written by one person?
Well, yeah, I mean, because they're at that time there wasn't a lot of budgets were kind of tight in terms of paying reviewers of software and writers, and so we tried to keep it as much in house as we could. And John also occasionally wrote articles under his name, under another name. Actually, he wrote a fair amount of articles, but he wrote some articles under his own name as well.
We're way into the ST era when you were doing this. How did you guys feel about? Did you personally care about computers? Did you like the ST? Were you just there for?
Actually, the ST was my first computer.
Yeah.
ST came out in '85. I believe I got my first ST in '86, and I was so I felt so nervous about it in terms of just being something completely different from what I was used to, that it just sat on my desk for 6 months. And I said, "Oh, I have a computer. That's really nice. I got to go do something else now." And eventually, I did finally climb into it, and I was hooked from there. I really fell in love with it. As a matter of fact, I just became an ST fanatic. I was a big evangelist of STs. I actually I also did desktop publishing on an ST, and then ultimately I went out and I got a Spectre cartridge which had actual Mac ROMs in it,
mm-hmm.
and you could run Mac software on the ST.
Right.
And so towards the end of the ST era, this was after I had left Atari Explorer. At that point, I still couldn't quite afford a Mac, but I was doing desktop publishing for clients using Quark Express, running off of a Spectre cartridge emulation on an ST.
Nice.
So I also had a recording studio back in the late 80s in Brooklyn called Amateur Studios, and we ran everything off of STs. We had one of the first Pro Tools programs which had come out for the ST, and it was a 2-track hard disk recording system, which at the time was pretty radical. And we also ran Cubase off of it, which was great, and a couple of other programs. So, yeah, I was a pretty big ST user. I owned a big ST, and then went on to a TT and ultimately a Falcon.
Nice. All right, so you're running the magazine, and tell me a story about being managing editor. Something that was interesting, or went wrong, or a deadline that was missed. Tell me.
Well, it was pretty. Like I said, it was a pretty small editorial staff. I think John's wife at the time was the associate editor, but she didn't work out of the office. So it was basically a three-man team. And we really we basically got along great. We had a lot of fun. We went one of the things I remember the most in terms of details and fondness were the shows where we would have our own booth, and we had people coming up all the time talking about the magazine and praising it. The magazine had taken a different artistic direction when John came aboard and became the editor in chief. You can see that from the cover that the whole type changed. Everything changed from the last issue that was in the old format, which was in January, February of 1990. Mm-hmm. And the new format with the words Atari much more prominent in the front. He had dropped the chevron that was always associated with Atari, mm-hmm. As a logo, and just had Atari in really big. It was probably 42-point type, prominently displayed at the top of the magazine. So it really popped out. You could really. You made, there was no confusion as to what it was. And it looked very modern. It had I thought, a much more appealing look. And he also adopted more of a magazine style for the cover, with a limited amount of type. There used to be a lot of type on the older magazines. So, there was more of an emphasis on a graphic with some descriptive text, but that was basically it. So it was great, and the magazine definitely got a lot of compliments.
Awesome. How involved was Atari Corporate in talking about what you were supposed to cover?
We never really dealt with the Tramiels at all. It was more or less. Some of the other, it was one or two of the other executives whose names at the moment I can't quite remember, but generally speaking, John had a very good relationship with them, and he had a really good understanding of what it was that they were looking to promote. He always checked in with them as to what if anything, they were looking to emphasize. Mm-hmm. And promoted at any particular time. The January, February of '91 issue featured the TT. We had the Jaguar featured in one issue. So, but for the most part, I have to say that when I talk to people about Atari, and they generally remember the Atari game systems. And the 8-Atari computers, which were really great. But when Jack was basically handed the company, because at the time, as I understood it, the bottom had dropped out of the gaming system market, and Atari was looking to, was it Time Warner?
It started off as what was Nolan Bushnell, and then Warner Communications before it was Time Warner.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then to the
right. It was Warner Brothers, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were looking to just get out of the gaming market entirely, yeah. And Jack was working for Commodore at the time, and had made a name for himself in terms of the Commodore 64 and some of the other machines that Commodore had been developing. And so they approached him and said, how'd you like to buy Atari? He said, yeah, sure. With what money? So that's all right. You don't have to worry about that. We'll work something out. And Jack, subsequently developed TOS, which was his operating system. That was really great. It was an amalgamation of both Windows and Mac, and was compatible with DOS in terms of their floppy disks. So and of course it was the first and to this date the only computer that ever had onboard MIDI ports.
Yeah.
Which made it an instant hit with musicians. But his vision and his ability to find technology that was ahead of the market, from the Portfolio to the Stacy laptop to the Lynx and Jaguar game systems, was just remarkable. I mean, he continually had these visionary ideas which he was able to actually implement and bring to the marketplace. But the problem was that bringing them to the marketplace was could only get you so far, and unfortunately, just could not market to save his life as far as actual marketing went. So subsequently, most of his innovations really never found the larger market that they really deserved. It was certainly big in Europe, and in Europe, there were law firms and hospitals that were running off of Atari computers. The Germans were really big about the Atari ST 16-bit, and the subsequent models that came after that, the Mega and the TT. And they had really adopted it, completely. But here in the States, it was really a much tougher fight, and I think the stigma of being a gaming company was a hard thing to overcome in terms of being associated with computers. So, unfortunately, a lot of the innovations, and there were incredible innovations. The Lynx was the first LCD color machine. It was had far more advanced features than the Game Boy at the time, and even the color Game Boy. And the Jaguar was a 16-bit game system. At the time when, or actually, no, what was it? I think actually it was a 32-bit game system at the time when most of the others were 16-bit. It was just lamentable that they weren't able to test their marketing challenges, and also the fact that the Tramiels basically. The two sons that came into the company and helped their father run it was rather a dysfunctional family, and that kind of also contributed to the overall inability for them to just get to market.
Did you see the magazine as a marketing arm or as news?
Oh yeah, it was definitely a marketing arm. I mean, that was one of the main emphasis that John felt was pivotal in terms of justifying the existence of Atari Explorer. I mean, it didn't necessarily kowtow to the Atari court, but certainly, Atari was funding the magazine, so there had to be a fair amount of collaboration there.
Mm-hmm. Were you still there when the magazine was shut down?
I was there to the end, which was the January-February issue. It was, we were all rather despondent that it was being closed, but there was a shift in the corporate structure there in California, and the new administration didn't feel that they really needed to continue Explorer. They felt it was just too much money, and at that time there were a couple of guys out there who had more or less convinced the corporation to go with a digital version. So I did do one issue as what was I was called Atari Artist. That was my title, and wrote a couple of articles. But
you were the artist in the all ASCII Atari Explorer Online.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. That was a total ASCII publication. It really didn't last very long. Although what was one of the things that was nice is and apart from the money I was paid, I also negotiated a Falcon as partial payment. So that was great. I got a brand new Atari Falcon out of that whole endeavor.
Nice. So okay, so yeah, it was online for. You only did. I thought you did more than one. I mean, the column went on for a while, didn't it? The Atari Artist.
Well, it wasn't under me. I mean, Bob Brody was the publisher of the digital version, and Ron Kovacs was the editor in chief, and then after that, it got taken over by Travis Guy, who was the editor. There was another fellow, and I can't think of his name either. I know Ron Robertson was the assistant editor, but basically, I remember Travis's name, and he was the one that I initially dealt with as the Atari Artist for that one issue.
Why'd you only do the one?
At the time, it wasn't. I probably wanted too much money, and for what they were asking, it just wasn't really worth it to me. As much as I loved Atari, but the magazine itself, the digital issue, went on until '96.
Yeah.
I think it was the last publication. The first one being in '92, May of '92. So it lasted quite a long time.
Yeah, they stuck it out a good long while.
Yeah, it did. But by then, I was long gone from anything having to do with Atari Explorer, either as a contributor or. I know that John occasionally contributed to the online version, and he kept in touch with them. But in any event, that was basically it. I mean, the shows were always great. They were wonderful to go to, and just like most of the other computer shows in competing platforms, they did get smaller and smaller with less and less exhibitors. But in its heyday, there were a tremendous number of companies that had software and hardware products for the ST. So I guess the big boom was probably in 1991 when the ST really started to establish itself.
So you got to go to a lot of these shows and meet people and show things off, and it sounds like exciting.
Yeah, and also just set up submissions for software that we would be reviewing, and talk to the individual developers. So just a lot of really great people, and there were also the there were a couple of major Atari distributors stores in the U.S. That were quite notable. I think there was one called Turtle. Was it Turtle? Again, this was going back a considerable amount of time, so so much water has gone under the bridge since then.
What haven't I asked you that I should have?
Really, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, the other thing that that I was particularly proud of was we had a special Atari artist issue. It was the first time we'd actually used that term, Atari artist, and there was a 16-page insert that was part of the magazine, which specifically focused on a lot of the music software that was available for the Atari, and there was a ton of really interesting stuff that was being developed. Pretty much most of the major companies at the time had a sequencing program for the Atari. There was eMagic, which Apple bought and turned into Logic, and Steinberg, which continues to this day. A couple of others that weren't quite as enduring and didn't necessarily last as long. But the other thing that was really innovative about the ST, as I mentioned, was the cartridge port, which really opened developers and users to a number of hardware add-ons that was quite ingenious the way it ended up being interfaced. And again, that was what allowed for, among other things, the Spectre 128 cartridge. Of course, you had to actually get your hands on
ROMs from
Mac EPROMs in order to put it in there, because it wasn't software based. That was definitely a hardware based. That was how the OS was run, via those Mac PROMs. But it was a great time. It was a great time for computing, and in comparison to today, it's there's everything that we had dreamed about and has basically come to realization, where multitasking was a very easy thing. I mean, even back then, the 16-bit Explorer, the 16-bit SDE was able to multitask, which was pretty cool. But I remember hearing stories about how Microsoft had hired a couple of Atari developers and their job strictly was to go through the code of some of their programs and just cut them by 50%. I mean, one of the things that to me was also so amazing was how the programs were so tightly coded, and very rarely, most programs were usually running under a megabyte of hard drive space, and of course at the time, when I first started working with Atari computers, they were all floppy based driven, and if you had a 20 megabyte hard drive, oh my God, you were the envy of of any other Atari fan. So the hard drives were nowhere near as big as they are today. I mean, a 60 megabyte hard drive was like just unheard of, and that was just, oh my God, that was really exorbitant. And that's, it sounds hilarious today, but back then A lot of the programs were running in 342K. I mean, it was very impressive. So I think that's one of the other things that you could really look back and say the code was really incredibly tight and just very efficient in terms of how it executed things.
If you could send a message to the people who read your magazine and are listening to this podcast now, what would you tell them?
Thanks so much for all your support. You were all fabulous, and had a great time with you guys. As far as the readers went, thanks for supporting us and believing in Atari and the SD. It was a great time, and I'll always think of it fondly. And even to this day, I always talk about the ST as being just an amazing machine that a lot of people even weren't aware of the fact that Atari was doing computers and 16-bit computers, no less. They always remember the Atari 8-bit system, which was comparable to Apple II. So it always amazes them. But thanks, guys. Thanks for sharing in what was an incredible and adventurous time. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this interview.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.